Welcome to another episode of Growth Stories. I'm Ben Landers. I'm your host. Thank you for tuning in. If this is your first time, welcome. If you've listened to the show before and you've enjoyed it, please give us a like, a subscribe, a review. It really helps new people find the show. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about something that is important but often overlooked, which is the legal aspect of business. Whether you're a startup, you're scaling up, scaling your business, or whether you're looking to transition, whether that's to transition to another family member or exit your business through acquisition, there are a variety of legal things that you need to be thinking about and considering. And again, they're important, but they're often overlooked. So in today's episode, I have a trusted advisor, a legal expert, someone who can really shed some light on the things that you need to be thinking about as a business owner. Again, whether you're just getting started or whether you're scaling and growing your business, or whether you are you've already grown it and you're looking to exit. So grab a cup of coffee, pen and paper, and enjoy. Tricia, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much for having me.
Hey, can you give us a quick intro, give the audience an introduction, who you are and how you got started?
Sure. I'm the founder and managing attorney at Meyer Law. We help companies of all sizes with the day-to-day. We often act as their outsourced general counsel. We help with corporate matters, contracts, employment, fundraising, M&A, and privacy. And we don't operate like most law firms. We promote transparency with respect to billing and prefer providing services on a fixed fee rather than that dreaded hourly billing that so many companies complain about, rightfully so.
I remember when I was just starting Blue Corona, I have a business partner, had a business partner. And we were creating our bylaws and, sort of all of our legal agreements. And I went to a local attorney, to just say, hey, could you just review the bylaws, mark them up, but like from my perspective, you're not going to be like the company's attorney. And I remember he pulled me into a conference room and kind of sat me down and said, let me educate you for a little bit on how, this stuff works in Maryland, Montgomery County, where we were located. And he didn't say anything about like the meters running. And so he talks for like 2 hours, just kind of rambling on and on. And then at the end, I said, okay, great. Thanks for that. Can you, can you mark up these bylaws and send them to me? And he goes, yeah. I'll give you a quote to do that. And I left. And then I got an email that had an invoice for like the 3 hours that we spent together. And then a separate quote for the bylaws. And I was like, man, it would have been great if you had like let me know, okay, like the meter starts now, it's $500 an hour. And, whatever it was, there was no
totally. Because how can you budget and plan for it if you don't know about it? No one wants to be surprised by an invoice, and you're certainly not. They don't just have a blank check. Your attorney doesn't have a blank check that they can just do with what they want.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
Yeah. So how did you get into law in the first place? I mean, did you know you always wanted to become a lawyer?
Yeah, so my parents really influenced my choice. My dad was a deputy sheriff, and so I worked in the clerk's office. And he really always said, you should be a judge, Trish. And I knew I didn't really want to be a judge, but I thought I wanted to be a litigator. I thought that sounds exciting, being in a courtroom all day, every day, which in reality couldn't be further from the truth and more different than like, who I am and what I'm all about. So I kind of fell into law school with that in mind, realizing after law school that that's not really what I wanted. Fell into working at a business it was a technology company, a software company. And that's how I kind of fell into the tech realm of law and loved it, actually. And so I continued on to HSBC and Discover, and then went to Reliance Globalcom. And then it was there that I decided, you know what? I'm gonna start a firm of my own and just build that up.
And so talk about that. When did you start the firm, and then how has it grown sort of over the years?
Yeah, so I started the firm back in 2010, so 13 years ago. At the time I had a 3-month-old and a 15-month-old, and I was working in-house, and was in a position where I just didn't really like the dynamic between the business
Mm,
and the legal. I love the legal team, but the business was a little, we were a little bit used and abused by the business.
mm,
You know, the way that we were being treated. And I thought to myself, well, this is not going to be my life. I
mm,
am not going to be continuing down this path. And so that is what led me to finally, that was like the straw that broke the camel's back, where I was like,
mhm,
you know what, I got to start my own practice. And I started it just at a time when entrepreneurship was booming, was just starting to boom in Chicago. And 1871 came about, which is
mm,
this amazing excuse me, it's an amazing incubator
yeah.
that helps companies who are just starting out and scaling companies with the resources that they need in order to bring their business to reality and then take it to the next level. And so I started resonating with all of these folks who
Mm,
are entrepreneurs and didn't even really realize that this community existed, and followed my passion. I mean, I just loved helping these other entrepreneurs and business owners. And so continued to grow the firm year over year
mm.
since then, and love what I do.
How is it, law firm has some things that are unique, to the legal world and the law firms, and then some elements are business challenges that kind of every business faces. How much of your time would you say you spend as an attorney, like subject matter expert, and how much time do you spend actually running and building and thinking about the culture and kind of the traditional CEO stuff?
Okay, so this is a great question, because when you had asked me in the list of questions that you sent prior about mistakes that I've made. I think
Hmm,
one of the mistakes that I've made is that I didn't jump out of the day to day
hmm,
soon enough. I mean, we've grown year over year, okay? So I'm not complaining by any stretch,
hmm,
but I feel like I really wasn't spending my time all the time on the right things. And now in
hmm,
hindsight, I can see that. I think, now I spend maybe 10% of my time on the day to day. My goal last year was to get 100% out of the day to day for
hmm.
our clients, but unfortunately, it's nearly impossible right now. I just have to dive in. If people
Yeah,
are out of the office or on vacation or whatever, and we don't have anyone
yeah,
else to look at something, I have to dive in.
yeah,
But it's only 10% of my time, and the rest now is really being spent focusing on biz dev and marketing and
yeah.
things of that
It's
nature.
kind of interesting how, you start a business typically around an area of expertise. And again, whether you're, to go like the spectrum, whether you're a plumber, an HVAC tech, a digital marketing expert, or a lawyer, an attorney, you start something because you have an area of expertise. You have, you want to design something different, kind of a different job slash company. But then as it grows, a lot of times, you end up doing less and less of that thing that where you were this absolute expert, and having to learn all these new skills of like, what does it mean to be a CEO and a leader, and how do you structure the organization, and as it
Yeah,
scales. And it's
absolutely. It's all constantly learning, right? Constantly
that's right.
learning new things and running into my own, roadblocks that I'm creating and
Yeah,
everything else.
yeah.
So being mindful of all of that is important if you
So
want to grow.
you started in an incubator. I mean, one of the things that I was thinking about is, companies go through, they have this sort of this life cycle startup, and then, if you're lucky, the business starts to grow and you have to think about scaling and organizational development, all that. And then again, if you're lucky, it continues, and maybe you get to a point where you want to exit either through acquisition, sale, or maybe transitioning to like the kids, if it's a generational business or an ESOP or something like that. And the legal considerations, at least in my journey, the legal considerations have evolved, with that. And so you started in an incubator where you saw tons of startup companies, where I'm sure some were pretty sophisticated and some were probably completely clueless with
Right.
from a legal standpoint. I guess so. Maybe talk. Our audiences are mostly business owners, and they fall into each of those buckets. People just getting started, trying to get some tips about how to grow, people that are scaling, and people that are, again, either exiting, they're in process of selling their business or thinking about it. And so I guess talk about, like, if you're a startup, what are some of the things that you see business owners, new business owners, overlooking, from a
Yeah.
legal standpoint?
I'm going to just run through a quick list of 5 for you.
Yeah.
So, one is not understanding the need to protect their intellectual property. If you are hiring someone to create something for you, a logo, a website, an app, a software as a service platform, that's your company's intellectual property. And if you don't have a contract that states that you own the rights to it, then the person that developed it or created it for you owns it.
Mm.
And so you don't want to put yourself in that position. So I think just not understanding the importance of the intellectual property and what it all means. I mean, it's one of a company's most valuable assets.
Mm.
The second would be failing to enter into contracts in general. Like if you're hiring anybody for anything, you need a contract. I think sometimes people will just, hire people just based on a verbal conversation or an email exchange. And then when things don't happen, or, things are not going the way that you planned, it's hard to enforce things when things weren't done properly in the beginning. And
Yeah.
and contracts aren't one size fits all either. It's not one contract for every relationship in the business. Different relationships have different considerations, and you need to look at those things so you're not setting yourself up in a bad spot.
Well, and it is part of the way that a company can use someone like yourself. I mean, I know when we were starting out, you would get, you'd sign up with, I'm just using this example, salesforce.com, and you get this basic, agreement, but then there's like 35 pages of 8-point font, fine print. And, I'm in startup mode and we're growing really quickly. And it's like, I don't have time no one reads all this crap. It's probably all standard. But I was fortunate that my business partner had a friend who was an attorney, and so I would just send it to him and say, Ralph, put your eyes on this,
Yes.
And is that how people can use someone, or how they
Yeah,
should use an attorney?
that's the key. I mean, it's all about knowing your risks going into it. So if somebody's presenting you with a contract, you should absolutely know what it says and know what those provisions are that could potentially sink your company. So that way you can either know of that risk and be okay with it or
Mm-hmm.
push back on those certain things.
Awesome, awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks. I didn't mean to kick you off
That's
your
okay. That's all
secrets.
right. Next, I would say making sure that you're protecting your confidential information, because if you disclose it to somebody that doesn't have an obligation to keep it confidential, you lose that right. And so you don't want that to happen.
Mm-hmm.
Fourth, if you're starting a business with somebody else, you better get a founder's agreement in place. I can't tell you, this is so often overlooked, and situations change, circumstances change, people's lives change, and it adds a lot of stress to the business when founders need to leave the company, or you're bringing different founders in and wanting to, grant ownership rights and all that stuff when you don't have the proper documents in place. And then lastly, giving equity grants out like candy is a huge mistake that I see. People promising ownership rights in a company without, making it subject to vesting, meaning certain triggers where they have to earn it over time or upon, the occurrence of certain milestones. Just making sure that you're documenting all of these
Mm-hmm.
things, because the last thing you want to happen is somebody is under the impression that they have an ownership right in your company and
Mm-hmm.
things are going south with the relationship, and then you've got to deal with that time, money, and energy suck.
One of the things that you mentioned was like having an agreement in place, and you mentioned like employees. And I know that we've had at least one, I guess I don't know, even know that it was a client, but probably better I just keep it sort of vague. But they had hired a sales rep, and they used this basic letter agreement, and they were flipping between the word commission and bonus. And they set things up in a way where the person was selling a recurring service.
Mm-hmm.
And so the salesperson built up this base of recurring commissions. And then they just stopped selling, and they were supposed to be generating new business, but that none of that was really articulated clearly. And so then the company terminated the employee, and the employee filed a claim and said, hey, I'm owed all these commissions on all this stuff that I sold, and it's millions of dollars. And this was like
Mm-hmm.
a tiny company. And they didn't, they ultimately, kind of settled. And that was the other shock to the business owner, was like, it will cost me more to fight it than to just stroke a 6-figure check, to just get rid of it. And it was
It's
like, I was like, man, I don't think I could do that out of principle. And he's like, principle is extremely expensive. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Oh
Um,
my gosh. But no, I see it all the time. You
yeah,
have to make sure that those agreements fit your business and at least that you're having an attorney look at them to get your baselines in
yeah.
shape before you're out there using them.
How do you think there's a continuum? I don't know if this is a flawed perspective, but I get the sense that you have this continuum where on one side you have, you know, sort of the maybe a small business attorney, maybe hasn't, maybe they've only worked in small business where, you know, maybe they miss some things that would expose you as the business owner in a certain legal situation. And then on the far other side, maybe you have, you know, like the $2,000 an hour, you know, big law firm, big brand, where they come up with, like, if you were sitting down with a partner to come up with a founder's kind of agreement, they would come up with scenarios that, if that happens, it's like, I mean, it's like we're paying so much to come up with this agreement for this a tenth of 1% chance that this might, you know, happen. Like, we'll be lucky if our business makes it a year. You know, like, let's just, you know, we need something. How do
Yeah.
you, as an attorney, sort of balance that spectrum from, like, how do you deal with that? Or do you have business owners where they you think they don't engage with someone like you or a law firm because they're like, you know, the lawyers just make
Yes.
it too hard.
100%, 100%. I think it's important to have the right perspective. And, as a lawyer, it's not your job to be the roadblock. It's your job to let your client be aware of the risks, let them know of the risks that they're
Mm,
facing, and it's their job to know or to decide whether or not they're comfortable with that risk. I think that oftentimes lawyers are deal killers. And for
mhm.
us, we like to facilitate and move things forward and push things forward. Again, just making sure our clients aware of the risk.
Yeah,
And I think that it's an important perspective to have. And I think it's unique in the legal field.
yeah. It sounds more entrepreneurial. I mean, I love the way that that sounds, and I would say that's it. I'm sure you know this, but that's probably a differentiator, you know, for
It
you. I
is.
think there's some firms that are like that. Like, it's like, we want to get it done, but we want to make sure you have the lay of the land as the business owner, so you can make an informed decision versus, yeah, the deal killer that comes up with every, you know, conceivable scenario. I'll have my tax team look at that, and I'll have it. And it's like, by the time all those folks look at it, you know,
Yeah, it's such a waste of time and money.
yeah.
Yeah,
So
right.
what about then, as a company is scaling, you know, that's you're a startup, and then all of a sudden you have a team of 50 and they're in multiple states, and, you know, you have
Yeah.
international clients. What are some of the considerations that, you know, that the CEO now has to start thinking about from a legal perspective?
Yeah, I think that you always want it to be easy to do business with you, but yet
Mm,
you should obviously be protecting your business as much as you can or otherwise be aware of that risk. So I think structuring your contracts the right way and all of the different aspects, of using your contracts is super important. You don't want to make it difficult to do business for you with you as you're scaling. So making sure that you're structuring your contracts the right way and that they are tailored to your company. And then as you enter into new relationships, making sure that you have different contracts for those relationships and different considerations because every business has different risk tolerances and every CEO is, like we have some clients that are extremely risk averse. So
mhm,
we'll counsel them based on that, but we'll also give them the other side, the other
mhm,
perspective. We have others who do not care about risk whatsoever. And so, we've got to, reel them in to make sure that they really do understand the risks. So I think just as you're entering into new relationships, making sure that you are taking different considerations in place and making sure that your contracts reflect that and then also reflect your risk tolerance. And then next and lastly, I would say that make sure your baselines of everything are in place and
mm,
cover your company from your hiring documents as
mhm,
well. And your employee handbook, as you're hiring in other states, you likely need to foreign qualify in those states. And then your handbook should include an addendum that includes state specific
mm,
information. So, making sure I think that you have a legal team too by your side who you can just ask questions of and regularly meet with so they can understand where you're going with your business and what you're doing
mhm,
and what challenges you're facing so you can be proactive
mhm.
about it instead of reactive is so key.
I almost think that that goes with just general business advice. You know, the one of the most significant sort of evolutions. I know as we grew, you go from where everything is reactive to where you're finally starting to look out, like where is the business going to be in 3 years and 5 years? What does the organization need to look like? What does excellence look like? And I would imagine, sort of what you're advocating for is like, again, what are the legal implications? Like now we have an international client. That's a trigger to like, does anything have to be updated? Like, let's meet with our attorney, let's meet with the legal team and figure it out. We just hired someone, make this up, in another state. I mean, I was thinking a lot of our clients are home service companies. So they have, trucks and warehouses and stuff like that. But then I think, increasingly they'll hire marketers or, other people that are in other states. And for them, that's new territory. Has this shift to more remote, I mean, it's probably not a shift in the tech world, but for a lot of us that kind of diversified distributed workforce, has that led to, sort
Yeah.
of things that you think clients are like, again, not
Yeah,
looking
so
at?
many overlook that foreign qualification and then the state-specific employment related laws that they should be aware of and how they should be handling
Mm,
things. And in privacy law
mm,
considerations, that's another huge one, especially as you start doing international business and making sure that your team is aware of all of the, privacy
GDPR
obligations
and
and processes and yeah, all of that
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
stuff. So yeah, it's super important. And one more thing I'll add is as you're growing your business, you also want to empower your team. So
Mm,
coming up with playbooks to allow them to push the ball forward in certain
mm,
areas and know when they only need to escalate certain issues,
mm,
giving them the tools to allow them to push things forward will
mhm.
just be more beneficial across the board for
I
sure.
I saw that. I saw mention of that on your website, the concept of a playbook. Is that something that you put together for the client for their benefit?
It is, yeah, it is. Basically a playbook explaining different contracts within the
Mm,
organization. So that way, like the sales team, for instance,
mm.
can make a lot of progress with the negotiations without having to pull in the legal team or the executives, and they can move the ball forward more quickly.
Yeah, that's I mean, again, I've been involved in enough deals where again, you have the sales rep who's negotiating with like a Fortune 1000 company that, of course, has like a whole team of a whole legal team pounding, the agreement. And then, yeah,
Yeah,
if they're waiting for the CEO or for the vice president of sales to get back to them on everything, and then that person's reaching out to their
yeah.
attorney, that can be
Even
a real
you, like
drag.
how can you think back to like how many times you've been a roadblock for your own business? I
Oh,
can.
dozens. Yeah, dozens.
Right. So many times, so
Yeah,
many times. So giving your team the tools to push it forward, it's important.
that's awesome. That's a great innovation. What about I guess companies? So we see kind of the transition exit. I would say probably in three flavors. There are probably others, but the big ones that we see are, a family-owned company, and then there's a transition to son-in-law, daughter, that kind of thing. And then you have this is pretty rare, but I think some will go the ESOP route. They don't have a, someone in the family involved in the business, but they want, to transition to the employees or a team of employees. And then M&A, is obviously it's a little bit different now, but starting in probably 2018, 19, it became just, went on fire and that continued where so many companies are selling to either a private equity firm or, a platform company in their industry that's rolling up, competitors. Um, Not to get into too much detail on each one, I guess the big one would probably be the folks that are selling or being acquired by like a private equity firm. What are things that they need to be thinking about from a legal perspective?
Yeah, I would say first find the right acquiring company. I mean, we have seen a lot of disasters where acquisitions have been done. People have gotten forced out because they didn't advocate for themselves. We could see throughout the deal the writing was on the wall.
Mm,
This was not going anywhere good,
mm,
and had alerted the client, but they were in a position where they didn't care at the time. And so I think first make sure that you're dealing with the right acquiring company. Second, be an advocate for yourself. If you want a employment agreement for a certain
mm,
duration or a severance package if they let you go, or ownership, options down the line or
mm,
additional restricted interest, being an advocate for yourself is really important. And then also making sure that you're getting everything in order before you're sharing it with that acquiring
mm,
company so that they can do due diligence before you get to that stage, it's really important to let your lawyer go through everything to make sure that there isn't any cleanup, and then to make
Mm,
sure that you're also aware of your risks,
mm,
because you're going to have to disclose those risks in conversations and in the documents that are
mm,
related to the transaction. And so it's important that you've got a full picture of all of that. We've been in situ fundraising matters where the client shared their data room with the other party before they let us get in there and dig through and like make sure everything was right. And so we were like simultaneously cleaning up as they were digging through, and it was just like
mm,
a disaster that really could have been avoided and delayed the whole transaction by months.
mm. That's a good tip. And I feel like legal is like sort of the last, for a lot of businesses, it's like sort of the last thing on their mind when really it's so critical, to their success exiting and having a good outcome.
Yeah.
So that's helpful. Anything else you'd add, any other, again, legal mistakes or things that people should consider? Or was that pretty inclusive?
Yeah, that's pretty inclusive.
Yeah. Cool. What are you working on now? What's your big focus for 2023? Anything you want to spotlight?
So now we're just going to continue our mission to help as many businesses as possible. We're going to be rolling out new packages like our general counsel package that
Mm.
we have, which is a fixed fee package for companies to get that recurring support each month. We're going to roll out some courses and some different memberships. And then I don't know if you know this, but I'm also the co-founder of the Clever Baby,
Ah,
and recently launched a new business last year. Our first product is Jet. It's a baby food feeder, medicine dispenser, and teether in one. And we have many other product ideas for products that aren't on the market today. So we're at just the beginning stages with the Clever Baby, and we're really excited about it. So I'm focusing some time on that as well.
I love I think there's a saying like if you want something done, find a busy person. And I can't count how many, entrepreneurs have a business that's scaling and successful and then start another one.
Right, right, right.
That's
I
awesome.
just couldn't help myself, you know. It was the product that we thought of. It just didn't exist, and we thought the world needed it. And so here we are,
That's awesome. So what's the website for that?
thecleverbaby.com.
Okay, cool. Let's check it out.
Yeah,
And then in your website, meetmeyerlaw.com.
that's right, meetmeyerlaw.com.
I think also I think we've talked about this in the past, but you do a great job with the content marketing, putting out tips, and whether it's through LinkedIn, I think I've seen you on every social channel. So anyone who wants to learn more, I think should definitely follow you across all those channels because you really do put out a lot of great, valuable, content.
Thank you
So
so much. That's
keep
so
that up.
kind of you. And I'll stop beating myself up over it because we're getting like 1/10 done of what I want to get done.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
Well,
so it's
I mean, that, what's it, like the cobbler's kid has no shoes. I mean, I think, to the extent that you can, yeah, get anything out there when you're, busy is impressive. And I think, yeah, to the extent you just keep doing that. We always joked around that, if we could do it all over again at Blue Corona, we would have just hired like a bunch of film students,
oh,
to just set them up in the office and just record everything and then have
yeah,
like an editor go through and basically just snip stuff out, that
sounds like
wouldn't
a
expose
dream.
confidentiality and all that stuff because just in the work that you're doing, like all the meetings that you have and with your staff, there's so much that you're probably creating that if you could just, have someone sort of like put it out there, it would be
A
great, but it's not
hundred
practical.
percent. Yes, this is exactly what I'm dealing with right now.
Yeah.
And I don't have time to like separately record. So it's like, how can I knock out two birds with
Right.
one stone and be recording while I'm in a meeting or while I'm
Right.
in a workshop or what, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And telling the
Awesome.
story behind the business because
That's
it's so
right.
important. It's so
That's
unique.
right. Yeah, I mean, it's like again with everything. I think there's always lots of companies that you can choose from, and and some have specialized expertise, and you need that regardless of whether you like or have a relationship with the founders. But so often, we end up doing business with people that we identify with or that we see out in the community and say like, I kind of feel like I'd get along with that person. Like they're one of my tribe, and And so, I think putting all the content and the videos and stuff like that, it's a great
Yeah.
way to market.
Yep. I
Well,
agree.
thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I know your time is money. And yeah, wish you all the best and congrats on the new venture. And we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks,
Have a
Tricia.
good day.